I welcome all to the second day of the SVC training session. May I know who just joined on the call? Okay, let's continue. We have stopped yesterday with the introduction to SVC. Today we will continue with the introduction to Storwize V7000, its hardware, and we'll see how far we can go with that. But before we proceed with the hardware aspect of it, there was one point that we discussed yesterday that perhaps was not clearly explained. That is the fact that SVC is an appliance that is in-band virtualization appliance that happens at the SAN fabric layer. What does that exactly mean? Please take a look at the screen. Okay, can everybody see the screen over the call and on the cloud meeting?
Yes, yes, Raja.
Yeah, thank you. So
yes,
please take a look at the screen. This is what we are referring to. SVC, as we have mentioned, is an in-band virtualization appliance. Of course, that works at the block level, but also it is not done either at a disk controller level. What does that essentially mean? We know that SVC can incorporate disk shells. Does that not make SVC essentially a disk controller? If so, how are we referring to SVC as a SAN or a fabric level in-band storage virtualization appliance? And if so, what is the difference between an in-band and out-of-band appliances? If you look at this, let us take, for example, another competitor for SVC or any other third-party virtualization appliance. Let us not name names, since this is a training that's getting. Let's call this VX. That's a third-party storage virtualization appliance. How does that essentially work? It contains a set of disk controllers, or a bunch of them, and will manage a lot of internal disk shells, which is the disk subsystem. Now, if you want to add a third-party disk subsystem to be virtualized by this, that means that the host will essentially get connected to the same controller without having to go through all the hoops of managing multiple storage subsystems. The controller will essentially virtualize the third-party disk subsystem in an out-of-band way. However, SVC does this in an in-band way. If you look at the left-hand side of the figure, it is the in-band appliance, which is a symmetric virtualization, and out-of-band controller-based virtualization, which is asymmetric. Why do we call that symmetric, and why do we call this asymmetric, or in-band versus out-of-band? As you can look over here, when you are getting a controller that is already managing a lot of disk subsystems, you have another switch, say, for example, an internal 5-channel switch or arbitrator loop switch, that then gets connected to the third-party disk subsystem. So any I/O that is relayed by the host will come to the disk controller and will then be redirected. Please note this word. Any I/O that is being received by the controller subsystem in an out-of-band communication will just be redirected to the third-party disk subsystem. That means that the third-party disk subsystem is still receiving an I/O request from who? From the host. Now let us come over to the left. If you can see here, new I/O request, this is very important. Once a new I/O request is initiated, the third-party disk subsystem, say disk subsystem A and C here, will not know the origin of that particular I/O request. In essence, the I/O request is not being redirected, but a new, fresh set of I/O requests is being regenerated from SVC, making SVC the initiator of such a request. If you look in this case, here the initiator is still the host and the target is still the third-party disk subsystem in the out-of-band controller-based virtualization. In SVC's case, it is in-band because SVC will be appearing as the creator of this particular set of I/O requests. What this then does is, it removes any obligation on the part of the disk subsystem to essentially give an acknowledgement to the host. Then what is sufficient? It is sufficient if the third-party disk subsystems just give an acknowledgement to the SVC. The job is done for the third-party disk subsystems. Now, while it is true that SVC still needs to give that to the host, as we have discussed yesterday, all modern arrays, including SVC, are all hash-based. Therefore, any of the issues surrounding with an acknowledgement that needs to be sent from the disk subsystem C to the host are not responsible as in this case. Your data gets virtualized and it sits in the path of your I/O request while it merely redirects the I/O request in the case of out-of-band communication. In other words, in-band communication essentially makes things faster. Also, as you can see here, these two devices will still operate as two independent devices in the case of an out-of-band virtualization. That means if I have a bunch of RAID arrays or a bunch of RAID groups, say in this subsystem C, and I also have some space on this subsystem C in the right-hand side, I cannot combine these two disk subsystems and create a carve-out, a LUN from this, because the controller essentially treats this as a third-party disk subsystem as opposed to its own disk subsystem, which is disk subsystem C. Now, while it is true that all the data from here is easily accessed from this controller, it cannot carve out a single LUN from two LUNs of these two separate disk subsystems. In the case of SVC, in the left-hand side, it is easy for the SVC to essentially treat both of them as just part of the same array group. It doesn't matter that one disk subsystem comes from a third-party vendor X and the other disk subsystem actually comes from a third-party vendor Y. And the reason why that is possible is because of the in-band virtualization it is doing at the fabric level. This virtualization is happening at the controller level. Please understand the difference here. These appliances requests are passing through the fabric and reaching at the controller level. What is the fundamental drawback for that? The drawback is that anytime you need to replace your virtualization solution, you will also end up replacing one of your disk arrays. Now, if you don't want to do that, tough luck, because that is where you are locked in. In the case of SVC, that is not so. I hope that this clears any questions regarding the in-band virtualization that we had yesterday. Praveen and Rajesh will continue with the slides that we have stopped yesterday. We'll continue with Storwize V7000 and its hardware aspects, and we shall see how far we can go today. As an apology for yesterday's early cut down of the class. It was a wrong calculation, but today the class will continue till 8 o'clock. The question and answer session will start at 7:40.
for this, add on to this, whatever you have heard, SVC presents itself as a storage provider to the host, and for the storage, backend storage, it acts as a host, as a big host where it can.
So that's what it means when we said SVC works both as an initiator and a target.
That's understood without any ambiguity. But on this outband controller, so you mentioned it is done at a fabric level, controller level, but on the other side you mentioned it is done at fabric level. What exactly means does it fabric?
No, I didn't get it. Go back.
No, not required. So very simple. As you said on the right side, outband, it is done at the controller level. On the other side, SVC, it is done at the fabric level. What exactly does it mean, fabric?
See, when the SVC sits in between, so in the SVC acts as a storage provider, as you said. All the operations will happen at the SVC end.
At the fabric layer.
Fabric layer.
Fabric is the fiber channel.
Fiber channel network.
The FAN network.
Yep.
Fabric at the network. But only at the FAN network. Then please do not confuse this with the regular Ethernet.
So hello everybody. So we'll start from where we left yesterday. Yesterday we were able to.
This is not.
I'm sorry, it's not reflecting in the cloud. Could you please reshare this?
So hello everybody. We'll start from where we had left yesterday. Yesterday we were able to touch SVC CG8 model and DH8 model. Okay. This is one of the slides that we were not able to complete yesterday. This is one of the most important slides that I think, which clearly tells us about different fiber channel ports. As we discussed yesterday that we have 8 GP-based fiber channel ports, right, and we can have total 16 fiber channel ports. So just after looking at these WWNs, we should be able to identify what is the slot number and what is the port number it is associated with. Okay, so we can clearly see here that after C we see some two numbers here. So this first number indicates the slot number associated with that SVC port. Okay, and there is another number that talks about the port associated with that slot. Okay. So if you start counting from here, you can clearly see that we have slot number 1 here, then port number 1, 2, 3, 4. So just after.
I don't think so, but we'll be sharing this.
So you can clearly see here that we have a slot here. Slot starts with slot number 1. Slot number 1 has 4 ports, port number 1, port number 2, port number 3, and port number 4. Okay, and similarly, you can again see slot number 2 and then port number 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so just after looking at the WWN of the ports, we can clearly identify which slot and port it belongs to. Okay, so whenever, in case you know the WWNs of the ports and you want to identify which slot and port that WWN belongs to, you can identify using this. Okay. So let us start with IBM StoreWise V7000. So in yesterday's class, we were discussing about the differences between StoreWise V7000 and SVC, right? So two major differences, I'll just tell it again, that there are two major differences. One difference is that in case of SVC, two nodes are separated, okay, and you need to connect them together using the fiber channel network. You need to perform a zoning in an existing fiber channel network in case if you want to provide connectivity across two nodes, if you want those nodes to talk to each other. In case of IBM StoreWise V7000, as you can see in the picture here, you have both the nodes that are part of the same control enclosure. Okay? Apart from this, there is one major difference that we have. In case of store-wide V7000, you can have more number of expansion enclosures. In case of SVC, as we talked yesterday, we were having 2 expansion enclosures with 24 drives each, right? But in case of store-wide V7000, you can add 9 extra expansion enclosures per IO group, okay? And each expansion enclosure can have 24 drives each, okay? That is a maximum number. That again depends on what kind of drives you are using. In case you are using 2.5 inches drive, you can have up to 24 drives. In case if you are using 3.5 inches drive, then you can have 12 drives. Okay, so accordingly you can calculate. Apart from it, when you look at the front side of this store-wide V7000, that side also contains those 24 drives. So if we talk about the complete rack, you can have 24 multiplied by 10. It means total 240 drives per IO group. Okay, and at max, as we discussed yesterday, we can have at max 4 IO groups. So when we do a complete calculation, we can have total 960 drives in a complete or fully configured storage V7000 box. Okay. So now let us talk about different ports that we have. So this is Gen 1 model of store-wide V7000, which shows us different type of ports that we can have. So in case of SVC, we were having different host interface cards, right? And accordingly, we could configure, or we can add or reduce number of ports, whatever ports we want. But in case of store-wide V7000, all of the ports are on-board ports, okay? So now let us look at the count of those ports. So in case if we are having 8 Gbps fiber channel connectivity and we want to know how many ports we have, we can have we are having total 8 ports, and those all are on-board ports. So 4 ports are residing here and 4 ports are residing on another canister. Okay? So 4 ports per canister. Now in case if you want to have 1 Gbps iSCSI connectivity, you can again have total 4 ports. Out of those 4 ports, 2 ports will be residing on one node canister and 2 ports will be residing on another node canister. Okay? So you can have total 4 ports. Now let us talk about 10 Gbps iSCSI ports. Again, we can have total number of 4 ports. Okay? So basically, it's going to be a CNA converged network adapter using which you can provide either fiber channel over Ethernet or iSCSI connectivity. So a CNA converged network adapter is something where you can have a fiber channel and iSCSI connectivity both as per your requirements. Okay? Now you can have 4 USB ports again, as we had in case of SVC. Apart from it, you have again SAS ports. So total number of port count for SAS port is 4 ports. Okay? So 2 ports per node canister. Now, in the previous case, we were having only 2 expansion enclosures. So we just connected one node to one expansion enclosure, another node to another expansion enclosure, right? But in case of store-wide V7000, since we have more number of expansion enclosures, we can have up to 9 extra expansion enclosures, right? So we need to have some daisy chain architecture, which will connect one expansion enclosure to another expansion enclosure, and so on. We have a picture coming in the upcoming slides where you will be able to understand how the backend connectivity happens in that case. Okay. So also you can see how many SAS ports we have, SAS cables. Once we talk about SAS cables, there are four cables you see that are connected to one single cable. Each one has a 6 Gbps speed. So if you do 6 multiplied by 4, it becomes total 24 Gbps, right? So since we have total number of 4 SAS ports, total bandwidth becomes 96 Gbps. Okay? So let us go to the next slide now. So this is Gen 2 model. So this is Gen 2 model. Gen 2 model, it has little differences compared to the Gen 1 model. Instead of having onboard FP port, it provides host interface cards. So these host interface cards are basically used for fiber channel and SAS connectivity. But apart from it, if you see other ports, you can clearly see that you have 1 Gbps port, 1 Gbps iSCSI port. So total number of port count is 3, right? So 3 ports here, 3 ports here. So total 6 1 Gbps iSCSI ports that we can see. Okay, for Ethernet connectivity, iSCSI connectivity. Apart from it, you can have Ignition port, which is again used for initialization of store-wide V7000. When you buy a new store-wide V7000, you need to configure it. So in order to configure it, we use this technician port. Apart from it, it is also used for troubleshooting purpose. Okay? And you have two power supply units where you connect your external power supplies in order to power it on. Okay, so let's go to the next picture now.
And here we have a compression accelerator slot also.
Yeah.
So it is an add-on to this next future, this generation, even it has a compression curve.
Yeah. Yeah, you had some question?
Praveen, one question.
Yes, please.
See, yesterday you told by using the technician port, we can do the firmware upgradation for one controller. It will upgrade automatically to the rest of the controllers. So the same way, when we are configuring that controller, do we need to configure for only one controller and the rest it will happen automatically, or we have to configure all the controllers?
Okay. To address this, for technician port is it's not like firmware is we will be using technician port. Normal management port is also used for the firmware upgrade. It's not like we need to use the technician port to address that. So configuration the nodes, it's when you're configuring the nodes, it means like both the nodes as a canister. What we say here is a canister. In the SVC we used to say nodes. Here it's a node canister we say. As a part of SVC V7000 configuration, it needs to be configured initially for both the canisters on the cluster.
Separately.
It's not separately. We need to add this canister to that cluster group.
And also please hold your questions till the Q&A session so that we can proceed. And at the end of the session and during the Q&A session, please go ahead with your questions.
And we'll be explaining this answer further. We have the answer for your question, and we are going to explaining during the question and answer session. Okay? Is that fine? Okay, let us proceed further. Let's go to the next slide. So this is how our expansion enclosures look like, and we have a single rack here. So as I told you before that this is a control enclosure. Basically, this control enclosure also has 24 drives. It is unlike, SVC where you have limited number of drives. This one has 24 drives once you look at the front panel. So as I told you before, you can have 9 extra expansion enclosures. So how many counts we have? Total 10 counts we have per rack. So it means we can have up to 240 drives per rack. So like this, if you want to have a fully configured StoreWise V7000, you can have total 960 drives. Another difference between SVC and StoreWise V7000 is that here you can have different type of drives. In case of SVC, we were having only SSD drives, right? You remember? We had only SSD drives. But in case of StoreWise V7000, we can have different type of drives. So we can make use of there is a concept that is called auto-tiering in case of storage. So we can make use of the auto-tiering here. That we'll be discussing in further classes again. Okay? So this is how it is. And again, you can have intermix of 12 and 24 bay enclosure. So it depends upon the size of the drive. If you want to have, again, 2.5 inches drive, you can have 24 drives. If you want to have 3.5 inches drive, you can have 12 drives per enclosure. So number reduces accordingly. Okay? We can go to the next slide now. So now what type of drives we can have? So as I told you before that we can have mix and match of different kind of drives inside the expansion enclosure. So we can have, in case of 2.5 inches drive, you can have up to 24 drives per bay. You can have SAS 15K drives with 146 GB and 300 GB, and the speed will be 15K. Then you can have SAS 10K RPM drives. The size of the drives are 300, 450 GB, 600 GB, 900 GB, and 1.2 terabytes. And again, you can have SSD drives, SSD eMLC drives, multi-layer cell drives. The size of the drives are 200 GB and 400 GB. And then again, 3.5 inches of drive. In case if you want to have 3.5 inches of drive, you can have up to 12 drives per bay. Size of the NSS drives, the speed of the NSS drive, as most of you know, is 7.2 RPM. So the size of the drive can be 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes, and 4 terabytes. Okay? So we can select any of these sizes as per our requirements. Okay? Now let us look at the rear end of the expansion enclosure, how it looks like. Okay? Okay, so this is the rear end of the expansion enclosure. Now, as I talked before, that here in this case we are going to have multiple expansion enclosure, right? In case of store by Z7000, so we need to have expansion enclosure connectivity in this case. So that's the reason we have two SAS ports per node canister. So one port connects to the node, another port will go and connect to the next expansion enclosure, and accordingly we will provide further connectivity. In further slides, we will be able to understand how it is connected. And the speed of the port is 6 Gbps, and we have dual power supply, and drives are hot swappable, and you can keep on growing the size of it by adding additional drives to it. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. So yeah, this is the slide which will make us understand how the connectivity at the rear end happens in case of store by Z7000. So here you see two nodes, correct? And you can clearly see one SAS port connectivity going to one of the expansion enclosure and another one going to another expansion enclosure. Similarly for another node as well, correct? And then you can see inter-node connectivity like this, right? So this is called daisy chain architecture, which many of the storage subsystems use, right?
Essentially, it ensures that no enclosure, no disk drive enclosure is connected to only a single node at any time. So if a controller node fails, it ensures that the partner node still have connectivity to the disk shelves to ensure that the data is still being written to the disks. The main point of having this sort of a daisy chain connectivity is to ensure that there is no single point of failure in the connectivity from the nodes to the disk enclosures.
So both the nodes have access to all the disk enclosures. So that is one of the benefits that we are getting out of it. And many of the storage vendors are using this daisy chain architecture. Okay. So let's go to the further slides, and I think here we are going to start with SVC storage provisioning. And in SVC storage provisioning, we are going to discuss about managed disks. Yesterday we just touched some based on managed disks. So basically managed disks, when we talk about managed disks, we are talking about the LUNs that are assigned, majorly about the LUNs that are assigned from external storage subsystems to the SVC. So when we create LUNs or volumes from the external storage subsystem and we discover those LUNs at the SVC end, they get converted into MDisks. We start calling them MDisks, okay, in case of external storage subsystems. Now, in case of internal storage, right, every SVC and store by Z7000 both have internal storage as well. So in case of internal storage, we create RAID arrays. So whatever RAID arrays we create, when we scan those RAID arrays inside SVC, we are able to see them as MDisks. Okay?
Previous slide.
I missed that sentence over there when I was there.
No. In the same disk, just repeat what it is.
Do you want me to repeat it again?
External subsystem to LUNs are detected by the SVC, then what it is? Those are called MDisks, then?
Yeah. So I'll draw a picture for you for this.
No, I understood, but
Okay, fine. So you have this SVC layer, right? And as we spoke before, you have different storage subsystems at the back end, right? Whatever storage subsystems we have at the back end, normally we create LUNs on them, LUNs or volumes on them. So these LUNs, suppose L1, L2, L3, these LUNs we created, and when we are going to scan those LUNs at the SVC end, they will be seen as MDisks. So that is in the case of external storage. Now, as we discussed before, we also have internal storage, right? So whatever internal storage we have, whatever the expansion enclosures we have, we create a RAID set or RAID array on top of it. So we combine, for example, 8 drives together and we create a RAID array. When we scan that RAID array at the SVC level, that is also recognized as MDisks. Those are also recognized as MDisks. So in case of external storage subsystem, those LUNs are recognized as MDisks. In case of internal storage, those RAID arrays are recognized as MDisks. Okay, so this is about MDisk.
MDisk essentially means a managed disk. Now, when we are saying LUNs from third-party disk subsystems, Essentially, they are all volumes in our host language. You receive a volume from the storage array. That is a volume from the host perspective. From a storage array perspective, that is a LUN. So when you are provisioning LUNs from your storage array, you expect them to be volumes for the host. But in the case of SVC or any other virtualization at the storage array level, these LUNs will not be utilized as volumes. Instead, they will be coupled with other LUNs of similar or dissimilar arrays and will then be provisioned to hosts as volumes. Therefore, we cannot name these ones as LUNs yet. Hence, SVC calls them managed disks.
Now again, what we do is we combine these multiple MDisks together and we create a storage pool. Okay?
So that will be in the next slide. You'll come to know how it is.
Okay? So next slide is going to explain about the storage pool. Let's go to the next slide then. So this is what a storage pool is. Storage pool is basically a combination of multiple MDisks together. You combine multiple MDisks together and you create a storage pool. Now once you have the storage pool, you create volumes out of it. Again, you create volumes out of it. So majorly you have two types of storage pools. You have a single tier storage pool, okay, and you have hybrid storage pool or multi-tier storage pool. So this is the point that you need to understand, okay? Specifically for the people who are not from the storage background. So in case of single tier storage pool, all the lengths that are using which we create a storage pool, they should have the same RAID type, the same RAID array size, they should have the same disk type, and the disk should have the same rotational speed. They should be of the same RPM. For example, as we discussed before, that we can have majorly NSS drives, SAS drives, and SSD drives. So in case of single tiered storage pool, we can either have SAS drives, or we can have NLSS drives, or we can have SSD drives. Okay? So whatever length we are taking, and while we are trying to form a storage pool, we have to make sure that they belong to the same category. Okay? In case of single tiered storage pool. Now let's talk about multi-tiered storage pool. In case of multi-tiered storage pool, we combine different types of drives. We combine NSS drives, SAS drives, and SSD drives together. So we have some LUNs or MDisks that belong to the SSD drive. We have some MDisks that belong to the SAS drive. We have some MDisks that belong to the NSS drive. So we combine them together and we create a storage pool. By having this storage pool, we can utilize a facility, or we can utilize something that is called auto tiering. Okay, so we will be discussing about auto tiering further. Okay, next slide.
Wait a minute. So, though we call this a storage pool, older versions of SVC used to call them as MDisk groups. If you use any command line utility for SVC, even today, most of the commands that actually deal with storage pools will be mentioning MDisk groups. So MDisk groups that you see in the command line are nothing but the storage pools that you see in your GUI.
And again, there are some specific best practices that are involved in terms of creating storage pools. So how you should create storage pool. Basically, when you create a storage pool, normally we should make sure that all the MDisks that we take in order to form a storage pool should belong to a single storage subsystem. I think you can guess the reason behind it, because in case if another subsystem loses connectivity or there is some issue with another storage subsystem, then storage pool or the volume that we create from those storage pools should not get impacted, right?
Not only that, it's a performance, each and everything will in place.
Yeah, again the performance thing also, it will give us that advantage.
It cannot see, when you say when I create a pool, so that pool establish the extent across the MDisk which we have. So when I say when the server access the data, so one extent it resides on X storage, another extent resides on the other storage. For the accessing, it takes a lot of time, and the performance issue comes.
Yeah, so that is also one of the major reasons why we should have this.
That's a major reason. Yes.
Okay. So now let's talk about mapping of extents. So whenever you create a storage pool by combining multiple MDisks, right, we have to define the extent size. Okay, we define the extent size. There is a reason behind it. Suppose you have created a storage pool with a specific extent size, then whatever volume we are going to create from that pool will take individual extent from individual M disk. Okay? As you can see in the picture. Can you see this? For example, this is one M disk, this is another M disk, this is third M disk, right? And we see different extents like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, right? Similarly, we see 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, and again 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E. So whenever we are going to create a volume out of it, volume in case of SVC are called V disks, okay? Virtual disk, V disks, that's what volumes are called. So whenever we are going to create a V disk, it will take extents from different M disks, one from this, one from this, one from this. So this kind of volume is called striped volume, okay? But in case if we want, we can always have a sequential volume as well. So in that case, what will happen? Extents will be taken from first M disk initially. Once all the extents are consumed, then extents will be taken from another M disks. When all the extents are consumed, then only extents will be taken from another M disks. Okay, so there is a benefit associated with creating a striped volume. Reason is the length or M disk that you have from the external storage subsystem, they might be residing on different drives, right? So in case if you are having a striped volume, you get a performance specific advantage where you have different spindles working at the same time, and it provides you some kind of advantage in terms of performance. Okay.
Though we are not encouraging questions in the middle of the session, this is a good point to take a break. And if anybody is confused because of the number of concepts that we are discussing here, please feel free to speak out or ask a question here, because we have just discussed RAID arrays, M disks, volumes, V disks, extents, and stripes. Any confusion regarding any of these logical attributes? These are the logical or fundamental logical constructs based on which the entire storage virtualization of SVC will further develop upon. Any questions on the phone?
We have an external LUNs presented to SVC as a
M disk.
M disk is grouped together as a storage pool. Out of that, V disk come up or carved out. Do we create again a RAID?
No.
Okay, let me explain that question. So the question is, what is the exact structure of all these constructs? Raw physical disks are taken together and combined into a RAID array. We are only discussing about the storage disks presented to the SVC from internal enclosures in this case. Okay, so the raw disks from disk enclosures of SVC or Storewise V7000 are taken and combined to form a RAID array. A RAID array is discovered as an M disk, that is a managed disk. A combination of managed disks will be presented as a volume or a V disk. Volume and V disk are synonymous. Now, each one of these volumes is comprised of extents. Each one of these extent is nothing but a chunk taken out of the M disk.
So here is a question. So for example, we might be having multiple different types of RAID 5 or RAID 10 or different types of LUNs and base. So what is the use case to make this M disk? There could be some best case.
There are best practices for what types of RAID arrays, etc. should be chosen for M disk, but that conversation will go depending upon what is the RAID type that you are going to choose for your application, for your host, etc. So that discussion is a totally separate one and does not really fall under the logical constructs which we are actually discussing. When we come there, we shall answer that question too. Any questions on the phone?
To address this, one more to add on to that. So as you say, as a M disk, when the external storage presents the M disk, it has its own way of securing the data. Write 5 or write 6, it has been configured there. So as we present it as a LUN to the store, SVC or V7000, V7000. So that's the M disk group. Internal, when I say M disk, the RAID array will be created based on our requirement. So then it will present as a M disk. Similar of RAID arrays will be formed as a one pole. We won't combine RAID 5 and RAID 6 in a one pole. So only similar of RAID arrays will be formed as one pole. So out of that, we will create what type of applications you have, what type of these things. Based on that, the length will be allocated to you.
So again, it depends on sequential write, random write. That's a different topic altogether. But basically, that depends on the performance. What kind of performance you want, and what kind of IOPS you are running against that volume. Depends. Yeah, yeah, correct.
One storage pool will have only one RAID.
One RAID type of M disks. Yes. Question from Kiran.
Basically on V7000, we are speaking about the volumes or the RAID what we create. It has been heard or told that I can choose different types of drives and LML and create a RAID pool, and now coming that then I create a volume out of it. As V7000 and it will be mapped to the host and all that.
To add on to that, to correct your question, when you are creating a RAID or something, so that cannot be combination of different disks. As a RAID creation, have a thumb rule saying same kind of disks should be there. When you're creating if it has a different types of disks, that will be a different M disk. All these M disks will be forming in a one pool. When you say M disk, so it has a SSDs, that's a one RAID will be there. Then it comes to the easy tab where it comes to enabling the things. Sorry, if I'm mistaken, you can come again.
Technically on a V7000 or any of the things, if I have different types of drives in it, of course we can go ahead and create a RAID using different types of drives also.
Yes.
Yes, and I can create a volume. This types of drives and I'm saying, yes, it may be an LML. I can choose those drives and create one RAID. Well and good volume, map it to it. Now coming back, we have something called Tier 1 on the SVC side and hybrid tires. Tier 1 says that I have to have a
Similar type of.
Now, can I map this volume? Now, when SVC already, basically we use for migration, which means already existing box and everything is there, which is like the one which I have now. I have a RAID volume which is of different type. Now, can SVC take this drives and as a volume is my question.
It can take the volumes, but will the performance be as good as we want? No.
The question is, will it take?
Yes, it will.
We can.
You can have.
What I heard on Tier 1 or a hybrid thing is, Tier 1 it will only take if all the drives are of the same type and the volume is the same type. Then
That is true in the case of disks being taken from the disk enclosures of SVC. When you are presenting M disks from a third-party disk subsystem, then things are different. That's because we have not yet covered easy tier. Once we cover easy tier, in that section, this question and its answer will be much more clear.
The next question is on slide 1 on the clustering side. Normally on the nodes clustering, when I use the service port or an OTP out-of-box configuration when I'm doing, you give some couple of commands and the cluster will happen of both the nodes. On SVC, does it happen on the same way? Because there are two different nodes and we are combining them on the SVC side. But when I see on the V7000, there is one particular thing, there are already existing two nodes. And we need to do manually one thing in the same procedure.
You have to configure it.
Yes, the same thing here also.
The configuration is pretty much similar.
It's combined in a one enclosure, but there is a different one. But the same concept, everything remains.
That's we are saying.
Concept, everything remains the same.
Can you go back the V7000 architecture, like this architecture?
Yes, sir.
Next. No, wait. So, node is there. Node up and below drive chassis is there.
Yes.
Any case, the drive chassis is failed. What about the rest of the enclosures?
See, here when you say enclosure, here also you have same way node A, node B kind of thing.
Okay.
It has a two different processors kind of things where it passes. It's not a one thing. It has a two sub.
That's the reason reason why we mentioned that at any single point there is no
Here you can see.
FPOF.
Expansion
Failures
canister.
do not exist.
Expansion canister 1, this is one box, and expansion canister 2, this is a one more box.
Okay, shall we continue with the...
Let him finish it. Is
No, let him finish.
We will cover that during the Q&A session.
That is the drawback of it. We covered.
drawback.
Let's continue that discussion in the Q&A
We'll be discussing it during question and answer session because otherwise it's going to delay our session. So,
Here it comes your address for the thing, how it is.
yeah, so this picture clearly makes us understand how is the overall, virtual architecture of SVC or Store by Z7000. So we have the backend storage subsystems, right? You can see backend storage subsystems here. Using this backend storage subsystem, we can create different MDisk, MD1, MD2, for example, belong to this disk subsystem A, and this MD3, MD4, MD5 belong to disk subsystem. This subsystem. So similarly, we can add multiple storage subsystems as a backend, and we can create MDisk. Now, as I told you before, it is a best practice to have a single storage pool MDisk from a single storage subsystem. We just follow it, the reasons we already know about. And then using this storage pool, we create different VDisks. Those are called volume here, and we can present those volumes to individual IO group. Okay? So I think I already discussed this point before, that a single volume or a set of volume can, if it belongs to a single IO group, it does not belong to another IO group. Okay? Because all the IO activity, that's why it is called IO group. All the IO activity on that specific volume that is coming from the host will be taken care by that specific IO group. Okay? And in that specific IO group from a single node, right? All the IO activity will be taken care by a single node. But the cache that we are having on that node will be synchronized with the cache that is available on another node. Reason being is, if one node goes faulted, then that volume will be taken over by another node for performing the IO activities further, right? So I think this point needs to be clear. This picture is very important. We should be able to understand this picture very clearly, okay, for understanding further classes, okay? So let's go to another slide now. So now, there is one of the most important points here, the extent size that we already discussed about. So once we talk about the extent size, we can have different extent size here, okay? Starting from 16 MB, and the maximum extent size can be 8192 MB. Okay, that is the extent size that we can have while we create a storage pool by combining multiple MDisks. Okay, so by default, the extent size will be 1 GB, 1024. Okay, by default, it will be like this. But in case if we want, we can change the size of these extent pools, right? But most of the time, you will find size of the extent size of 1 GB. Now, depending upon the size of the extent, different like, thin provisioning volume size, maximum thin provision volume capacity, maximum compressed volume size, maximum MDisk capacity, and the total storage capacity varies. Okay? So this picture clearly shows us. So in case if we are having extent size as 1 GB, the total storage that we can have is 4 petabyte. In the fully configured SVC storage, we can have
Storage pools.
storage pool size can be up to
4 petabytes.
4 petabyte. No, it is total storage capacity in fact. 4 petabytes can be the total storage capacity of the complete cluster. Okay, and accordingly we can have different MDisk size, maximum size of MDisks. We can have maximum compressed volume size. We can have maximum thin provisioned volume capacity. We can also have maximum non-thin provisioned volume capacity. What is a thin provisioning? We will be explaining further. Storage guys, they might be knowing about thin provisioning, but we'll be discussing about thin provisioning as well, okay, in upcoming slides. So, now, when we create volumes out of a storage pool, we have to take care of, we need to know what is the extent size that we are using. For example, in case we are using an extend size of 8192 MB, okay, and we want to create a volume of 2 GB, right, 2048 MB. What will happen to the remaining space? Because extend size is larger than the size of the total volume, right? So that remaining space will get wasted, right? So that's the reason, because normally when we create volumes, we create them in the form of GBs, right? So 1 GB, 2 GB, 3 GB. So it is always a best practice to have a extend size as 1 GB, and that's the reason the default extend size is kept as 1 GB, okay? This point is clear? So let's go to the next slide now. Now this is the final review of whatever we discussed. So it says managed disks or SCSI LUNs. Okay, managed disks or SCSI LUNs are grouped into storage pool. A maximum of 128 managed disks can be grouped together into one storage pool. Okay. Another point is storage pool contains managed disks. These disks or LUNs are typically larger in size, ideally same size, and for availability from the same storage system. A maximum of 128 storage pools are supported per SVC cluster. Okay, so in a single SVC cluster, you can have a maximum of 128 storage pools. Okay, now volumes are mappings of extents. As I told you before, volumes are basically logical entities, right? So volumes are mapping of extents that are contained in one or more managed disks which resides in the same storage pool. So when you create a volume, it belongs to a single storage pool. Okay? A maximum of 8192 volumes are supported per SVC cluster with 4 IO groups, and each IO group supports 2048 volumes. Okay? So when I say each IO group 2048 volumes, I mean to say 1024 volumes per node. And when I say 1024 volumes per node, in a fully configured system, how many nodes you can have? You can have total 8 nodes. So when you multiply 1024 by 8, it automatically becomes 8192. So total number of volumes that are supported in a fully configured system are 8192 volumes. And a volume can be up to 256 terabyte of size. If we are using the maximum extent size, in the previous slide we saw the maximum extent size, right? We saw maximum extent size is 8192 and maximum volume size, thin provision volume size is 262144 GB, and maximum storage cluster capacity is 32 petabytes. Okay? And you can see 256 terabytes if it is a non-thin provision volume, right? So this is how it is.
Please take a note though that it is imperative that everything comes with its own set of assumptions and calculations. So when you take a huge extent size, it comes with its own downsides. There is no free lunch. So when you take a huge volume size, you have to compensate for it elsewhere, either in performance or access or any other option. We will not be discussing that option at this point, but please bear in mind that you will have to pay up for something if you are taking a huge 32 petabytes from an 8-node SVC cluster. Not every environment will suit this purpose. There are some where this is very much advisable, but at the same time, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution.
So let's go to the next slide now.
We received a feedback that the refresh rate is a bit slow, so please hold for a second before we go to the next slides.
Okay, so let us discuss about internal drives. So there are different states of internal drives. Okay, when you look at the SVC GUI, or if you check in the CLI, there are different states of internal drives that we have in a SVC or store-wide system, any system. So one state is unused. So when a drive is in unused state, the drive is not a member of an M disk. You have not created a M disk on top of the drives. It means in this case, you have not created a RAID array, basically, because these are internal drives, right? You have not created a RAID array, and in that case, the drive is not a member of M disk. The GUI, actually, in fact, CLI also offers to change the drive use attribute if it is selected as part of an array. So basically, if a drive is in unused state, you can right click on it from GUI, or you can also run a command from CLI, and you can change this drive state from unused state to a candidate state. Okay? So a candidate state drive is a drive which is available for use in an array. So if a drive is in unused state, you cannot directly jump into a member state. Okay? First, you have to go to a candidate state. So now when a drive is in the candidate state, you can turn it to a member state. So member is a state where the drive is a member of MDisk. When a drive is a member of MDisk, it goes into a member state. Okay? Now spare state, when the drive can be used as a hot spare if required. So I think most of the people might be knowing what a hot spare is. When a drive gets faulted, right, the data is copied to another drive, and that drive is declared, that kind of drive is actually a hot spare drive. So that drive becomes a part of the RAID array. Okay, hot spare drive. And the drive, again, there is one more state that is called failed state. So if the drive is in faulted condition, it will be in the failed state, or you can manually actually make a drive offline. When you manually make a drive offline, it also goes into a failed state. Okay, so these are the different states of the drives.
To add on to this is not for SVC, not only for SVC, but for both V7000 and SVC. So thank you.
Let's go to the next slide. So now, we can see the graphical user interface presets. In fact, in CLI also, I mean, what are the different kind of RAIDs that are supported? Okay. So one is RAID 0. Okay, RAID 0 has only striping. It doesn't have any kind of redundancy in case of drive failure. We have RAID 1, which is called mirroring. Okay. And we have RAID 5. Which is basically striping with parity. Then it also supports RAID 6, which has dual distributed parity. When two drives get faulty, then also our RAID set will remain online. And we have RAID 10, which is called striped parity. And these are the different RAID types that are supported. And RAID array automatically added to storage pool as MDisk. So when you create a RAID array on the internal drive, it is added as a MDisk to the SVC system. Okay, and SVC DHH can build array across both 24F enclosures, means expansion enclosures attached to each node in the IO group. Okay? So I think we can go to the next slide now. So now let us talk about the different states of the MDisk. The way we have different states of the drives, we also have different states of the MDisk. So one state is unmanaged state. In MDisk will be an unmanaged state if it is not part of any storage pool. As we discussed before, that we combine multiple MDisks together and we create a storage pool. So if a MDisk is not part of a storage pool, the state of that disk will be unmanaged. Okay. Now, if you see a MDisk in a managed state, it will indicate that that specific MDisk is part of the storage pool. That is easy to understand, correct? Now, another state is called image. That is a little different. Now, this is one of the things that we need to understand from our migration perspective. Okay, so for example, if we have an external storage subsystem where we have a LUN which is directly presented to a host, we are not using an SVC in between. Now, our purpose is to convert this LUN from storage managed to SVC managed LUN, right? In that case, that kind of state, when it is converted from, a state where it is managed by the external storage subsystem, and we convert it to get managed by the SVC, that kind of state is called image state. Okay? So we do a image mode migration. There is a step in further classes where we will be performing image mode migration in which we'll be taking a LUN or volume from the external storage subsystem which is managed by it, and we'll be migrating it to the image mode. Okay?
So image mode is nothing but like when we have a external storage or something assigned to the SVC, that one-to-one connectivity to the host. So it's not like RELAPU or something, it's a one-to-one connectivity. It doesn't have a sensitive traffic.
Essentially, this answers Kiran's earlier question. What happens when a third-party disk subsystem has multiple types of disks and multiple tiers of disks all presented into one single LUN and is being presented to SVC? That when is incorporated into SVC will become an image mode MDisk. It is an MDisk, no doubt, but it is a special type of MDisk, and that type of MDisk is called an image mode MDisk. And we will use that to migrate the data from one of these third-party disk subsystems either to another third-party disk subsystem or to multiple third-party disk subsystems which are providing MDisks, or even to MDisks created internally on the SVC or the V7000 disk enclosures.
So when this image mode things comes into picture, when you say like I have a storage which is already existing in our environment, I want that to be migrated to a different thing. That's the place where the LANs which is already presented to the host, the same LANs will be presented to the SVC, and we will import it as the image mode. And once the image mode is done, the activity will happen. Then we'll reconfigure it. Once this activity is done, then we'll migrate this one to the different storage pool where it is coming from the different storage. Then the migration will be a live migration. Once the sync, everything is happened, then we'll cut down this primary one, and the secondary one will go to the primary.
We will discuss the migration further on in the migration classes.
Okay.
There is too much to go on to just explain this in a couple of steps.
But basically it doesn't format the external LUN that is being assigned to the SVC. We are not formatting it.
The image mode doesn't have.
So that's the reason it is a specific kind of mode.
No, you have to.
Yeah.
We will discuss that.
So when you importing, that time you need to specify it which thing needs.
So there is a
Type of the
specific step.
mode.
You right click on it, it says import to image mode. There is a step for that.
Migration, I think, your question, the user whoever is doing that, right, has to done is that
We will cover that during the migration. Please.
or if you are doing that,
We will cover that during the migration class. This isn't that place.
We'll make you understand, don't worry about that. Okay. So now let us discuss about, how it looks like, how Node takes care of different, MDisks that are assigned for the external storage subsystem. So basically, there is a concept called preferred node. Okay. So these are two nodes basically that you can see, and these are different volumes here. Okay. So whenever we are, creating a volume, we have to select. By default, there will be a preferred node when you create a volume. Basically, the preferred node is the one from which all the I/O activity happen on that specific volume. That node is called preferred node. Okay, and the combination of two nodes is called an I/O group. So, as I already discussed with you guys, both of these nodes will be having, synchronizing the I/O cache across these two, and then only an acknowledgement will be sent to the host, and then only further writes will happen on that specific volume. Okay, so there is a best practice that they are discussing about. They say that depending upon number of volumes, number of ports that provide connectivity between the backend storage subsystem and the node, we should assign it in the multiple of those number of ports. Basically, it has been, it is just like a best practice, so that there is load balancing happening across all the ports. Okay, so this helps us in providing a load balancing across all the ports. Other thing is, whenever you are creating volumes, they are created on round robin fashion. Okay, first volumes will be created on one set of I/O group, another will be created on another set of I/O group, and so on, because we want to make sure that load is distributed across all the I/O groups in the SVC cluster. Okay, so that is the reason.
To add on to this, when we are creating a volumes or something, we'll be defining, we can define or we cannot, but usually a best practice will be defining which I/O group it should talk to. When I say the I/O group, so it will manages where it should pass on. It has algorithm way of the things where it manages, but we will be defining only on the I/O groups, not with the nodes. So only on the I/O groups. So when I have when I require a server requires 100 volumes, so I cannot give it 100 volumes to the same I/O group. So the I/O group will be split across. So volume 1, I'll say volume 1, and volume 2, volume 3, volume 4. It should talk to the, sorry. No. So volumes, each 100 volumes also balanced across the I/O groups. But inside this IO group, it manages which node it needs to pass on. That it balances.
And similarly, the same cases with the MDisks as well. Basically, when you create MDisks,
Could you please repeat this? There is a request. Could you please repeat the path management for the individual nodes and the corresponding set of volumes?
Volumes. Okay. When I say like an IO group has two nodes. IO group has two nodes. When I create a volume, I will define which IO group, not with which node. So this IO group manages where it should be. It should be node A or node B. That has an algorithm way to balance it where it should go on. We are not going to define on the node perspective. Only on the IO group we will be defining it.
Is that clear?
Is that for already existing one we are referring?
It doesn't matter. Even for a newly created ones, the management will be assigned from an end user perspective only to the corresponding IO groups,
So
not at an
I don't have
individual.
authority to say you go and speak to node 1 if I have a value. It will only do that particular thing you say?
No, can you come again?
I'm saying that if I have a volume on subsystems and I'm giving it to the HPC,
Yes.
that particular time and say it's already existing, I'm saying please go and join yourself to node 2 IO group. One IO group, which is 2 nodes, right? 4
Yes.
nodes. There are two nodes. In these two nodes, two of the nodes are called as one IO group. I'll then go and speak to this IO group.
Yes.
It will go and speak, right?
Yes. It go and speak to the, that is the only thing. That is what you are going to define it.
That's all I can do.
Yes.
So what inside which one is combining and all that, it will take care of.
It has its own algorithm way to manage it.
but I think in later stages, if you want to change the node, we can do that by going to the volumes property.
No determinism because users servers may change and all that. That much you have to give it.
No, I don't. I'll check it out.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go to the next slide then. So now one of the very important feature of our SVC cluster, this is called SVC quorum. Okay, so in any normal kind of clustered environment, we use quorum, right, for heartbeat purpose. So similar kind of quorum we have in case of SVC. SVC has a feature of using providing a split cluster. Okay, what is split cluster? If we think about it, in case of V7000 store-wide, both the nodes are part of the same controller unit, right? But in case of SVC, we do have two separate nodes which are connected together by a fiber channel network. Okay, this SVC cluster thing, split cluster thing, is not invented. Was not initially provided by the IBM. Okay, it was some kind of suggestion given by some customer who told that why can't we utilize these two nodes and we can keep these two nodes in different locations, right? And we can provide a split cluster functionality. Okay, so where we can have one set of node belonging to all IO group in a specific location, okay, and one set of node belonging to all IO group in another location, and we can have a SVC quorum maybe in third location or any location basically, but we can have it in third location as well for disaster recovery purpose. Okay, in case if a connectivity loss between these two locations, SVC quorum will help us to perform a tiebreaker, and it will decide which node or which set of node will remain as active node set. Okay, so that is a feature of SVC quorum.
Now this SVC stretch cluster, again, as mentioned earlier, is not an everyday scenario and is not to be taken lightly, because what you are trying to do is take each and every node of a cluster and geographically separate them. This introduces single point of failures within each geographical location. Now, granted that there are situations where you might want to choose that, and that actually comes with a lot of pre-verifications and checklists that you should go through, and this is a situation or a solution that you should not undertake lightly. SVC stretch cluster is suitable for very specific environments are not suggested as a DR setup. This is not a DR setup.
Need dot site. We need to create.
So this is how it looks like, right? This is IO group 0, IO group 1, IO group 3. You have nodes, and this is one location, this is another location, right? You have node 1, node 2, node 1, node 2, node 1, node 2, and you have quorum, which is located at the third site, okay? Because if it is located at any one of these sites and something happened to this site, quorum is also lost, right? So normally it is suggested to have a quorum at another site. So if any of the site fails, right, this location fails, we already have all the IO groups available with us, and these nodes can take care of, the volumes that were residing previously on that node, because there will be a volume failover happening, right? And this quorum will be working as a tiebreaker, because suppose there is a connectivity loss between these two nodes, then it will be the quorum disk which will decide which node should be working which set of nodes should be working as an active node. And it also stores, configuration specific information, where, for example, the previous state of the replication that has been performed. Was it in a consistent state? Was it in a synchronized state? So when we discuss about the replication, we'll know about that. So in case if quorum disk fails, we will not be able to save the previous state of the replication. Okay? So replication will not be able to perform replication further in case if quorum disk fails. So that is also one of the important parts.
We are jumping at least 2 bridges to go there, so
yeah,
let's go across that bridge when we come there.
So now this is the power on sequence of our complete SAN network. Okay, so this is the general practice that we follow in case of SVC. So first we turn on the fiber channel switches, then we turn on the disk enclosures, then we turn on the external storage subsystems, okay? Then we power on the SAN volume controller, our SVC, and finally we turn on the host systems, okay? So this is how it is. And if you want to do a power up or power down, we will follow the opposite sequence.
Let's see next what we have.
This, I think, is a good place to stop for the day. We have completed the SVC hardware, and we have gone through the power on sequences, and we also covered the logical storage constructs. I think the time is now for the Q&A session. Any further questions?
Yeah, there is a V7000